Alrighty. So this is just going to be a small presentation over my idea or my research project for CSC 5200. This is the spring of 2019 for Tennessee Tech. My name is Christian Bear, and yeah, let's do this. So the paper itself is the implementation of network-enabled nodes to assist navigation in autonomous vehicles. Now, the idea behind this, it's supposed to work concurrently with the current methods of autonomous driving, which are the candy edge detector and the huff transform. Now, these two methods basically enable the vehicle to see. They give they take a picture of the vehicle's surroundings and then transform it into a method that the vehicle can see. Which is great, for vehicles in front of you. The vehicle in question with these systems can say, "Oh, there's a car in front of me. I need to slow down," or what have you. Now, the issue and where this process comes into where it has its faults is what happens if the weather is bad. The vehicle effectively loses its sense of sight. Which, as one can imagine, can be a bit of an issue. So we need an idea that kind of circumvents this and kind of acts more so as a safety net to ensure that a vehicle, regardless of the environment, regardless of the weather, can maintain and can communicate with whatever setup that we have to make sure that it stays on the road. And that's where this idea truly resonates, and this is where we focus. We don't focus on traffic or turning or anything. We focus on lane maintenance, maintaining your lane while you're driving. Now, the need for this technology, can't be understated. Nearly 1.25 million people die each year due to car accidents. And, with our smartphones becoming more and more evolved, distracted driving is just increasing exponentially, claiming 9 lives a day and so on. So the idea right here, we start really with driver assistance, and then we can increase this idea further, truly trying to reach autonomous driving. So a couple assumptions that we're going to make before we jump into this is, one, we're just going to assume that the road in question is a simple two-way single lane road. It's a flat road. We're not going to deal with elevation change right yet. And we're also going to assume that it is a straight road, arguably straight. We don't want to deal with curves or anything quite yet. We will get to that, but right now we want to develop this idea basically as a base for us to grow from. This is a proof of concept. We don't have a lot of empirical data. That's going to be our next step. We do say that all of the vehicles on this road have the capability of communicating with the nodes or vice versa. So all of these assumptions in mind, we have the basic structure. One can kind of think, oh, okay, this is pretty much like a rural interstate. All of these ideas work a little bit together, so there might be a small amount of crossover, but I'm going to do my best to not bring up a topic unless we've already discussed it. One thing that I do want to say right off the bat is that this idea, the whole concept, you have to be efficient. And for this idea to work, efficiency is going to be key. So there's already going to be a number of things that we can make more efficient. However, at the current moment, we're just trying to make sure that the idea is a good one, so to speak. Let's go ahead and make sure that I'm still recording. Yep, looks like it. And let's go ahead and jump into what the network nodes, what they're capable of. Now, these nodes, by network node, I mean like Wi-Fi enabled, Bluetooth enabled, some sort of way that they can have a wireless communication with vehicles. They're going to be evenly placed on the road and have the ability to detect when a vehicle is in its field or in its bounds of communication. It will be able to determine the vehicle's destination relative to itself, and then also using speed limits and such that have been explicitly programmed within the node. It can communicate with the vehicle in question and determine its speed and give it messages saying, "Hey, you need to adjust the rotation of your tires in order to maintain your lane of travel." We're going to go ahead and say that the nodes themselves are explicitly stated in terms of where their neighbors are. This cuts down on the amount of computation that is going to be necessary, which will lower cost, which is fantastic. We will also the nodes will be programmed with an acceptable area for the vehicles to maintain. This can be altered depending on the road itself. However, this is explicitly stated within the nodes whenever they are placed. Now, the key to these nodes is that once they are placed on the road, they do not move. They stay there because a large amount of the information that they are going to be using is directly dependent on their geographical location. So they must stay where they are. In future work, we will be able to make it just a little bit better in terms of trying to alter the information within it without moving the nodes. However, at this point, we just have the nodes themselves with the information that has been programmed within them. So let's go ahead and get an idea of what the nodes would look like. Here is a small figure, but it can be a little hard to see, so I want to go ahead and add a little bit better. Whoop. Okay, perfectly fine. So this is going to be the basic setup of all of our nodes. The black nodes indicate all of the nodes that are going to be working on the left side of the road, and the white nodes are all the nodes that are going to be working on the right side of the road. And I have a small little legend right here, or a key, so to speak. So you're going to have edge nodes, you're going to have margin nodes. Now, as you can probably tell, there are going to be two margin nodes back to back. The issue here is that we want to make sure that that we don't overload the bandwidth for any of our processors or any of our nodes, so to speak. So we have two nodes in the middle of the road, one dedicated for one side of the road and one dedicated for the other side of the road. And now they can determine this by using the distance over time, or they are many methods of determining which node is working for what side of the road. Now, this is going to be the first installment of, well, that could be more efficient. Yeah, we could have just one node that works for both sides, providing that the processor within the node is strong enough. But, we're trying to just do a worst case scenario and build from there. We don't have any empirical information in terms of what the processors can handle. So we have this set up as just if the nodes have to be just bare bones, this is the minimum of what they have to be able to do. So that's going to be our basic setup here. We're going to go on back to paper. And let's go ahead and discuss the physical location of each of these nodes. Now, any node that's going to be on the same line, so if it's on the edge or in the margin or the other edge, either way, it's going to be that same line. They're going to be 0.05 miles apart, 264 feet. And the margin nodes or edge nodes, whichever you prefer, are going to be offset by each other by half of that distance. This allows for a pretty good field, an overlapping field to happen. Yeah, so we have all of that. We've discussed that. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the field of the node. And you can see it pretty well in this figure right here. The field of an individual node in the field here is defined as, you know, how far its area is in terms of being able to detect and communicate within. So we just say field, it's easier. But as you can tell here, the field of an individual node it can encompass that of any of its neighbor nodes. Now the neighbor nodes are going to be defined as two nodes, the two adjacent nodes on either side. So right here and right here and right here and right here, those four nodes are going to be considered the neighbor nodes for the center node right here. Now, once again, as you can tell, the field of this center node contains all the other nodes, or all four neighbor nodes, which is going to be very necessary in terms of trying to figure out where the vehicle is and communicating with the vehicle. So figure 3 goes ahead and shows, okay, this is how all of the fields are going to be at the same time. And as you can probably tell, it's a little hard to make sense of what's going on here. However, say the vehicle was right there. You can tell that this node is working on it, this node is working on it, this node is working on it, and that node is all working on it if we were right here. Now, as we move out, we get caught by that node, and so on. So we're going to go ahead and answer the question, so how the nodes are going to be able to tell where the vehicle is in relation to them. And this is we're going to go back to Algebra 2 and use just a simple distance formula. It's going to be able to tell where it is using the distance formula. And also, gotta love a little bit of trigonometry. Now, it is important to note that these, in order to get a good representation of where the vehicles are and how fast they're moving, a calculation is going to be made every 1/10 of a second. And this just allows for safety in terms of effective and on-time communication. So we're going to go ahead and say what the acceptable area, quote unquote, is. We've already discussed that a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and promptly define it here. The acceptable area is basically where the car needs to stay within the lane. We don't want it too far on one edge, too far on another, so we define this acceptable area to be whatever the width of the lane is times 6.25%, and that's going to be plus or minus. So from the center of the vehicle, it can only vary 6% of whatever the width of the lane is. So we kind of make sure that it stays relatively center. So from here, we're going to go ahead and determine what the node types are. And a lot of the node types themselves, before we jump into this discussion, the node types, we lose this functionality depending on how we have depending on who does the computation. Because right now what we have is that the nodes themselves, they gather all the information of the vehicle and of the the conditions that are currently available, and they do the computation and then send it to the vehicle. Now we can make this a lot easier by having the vehicle itself, the onboard computer, doing the computation and just generally taking all the information from the nodes being the that which facilitates all the information. Unfortunately, to do this, we have to have we have to have a certain standard among among all onboard computers, and that can be a little dicey. So we just have the processors themselves doing the computation, and as long as the onboard computer has network capability and can communicate with the nodes. That's all they need. They need to be able to take the information and then apply the information. It makes it a little bit easier, and you don't have to deal with standards in terms of different manufacturers. However, that is to say, it can be made much more efficient if there's a standard in place. However, right here we're going to kind of designate and give certain ranks to nodes as they are. So if you are on the edge of the road, you're going to get the designation of primary. If you are in the margin, you get the designation of secondary. Now, the closer the nodes are to the vehicle, you get a certain rank, rank 1 or rank 2. So there are going to be 4 designations: primary 1, primary 2, secondary 1, and secondary 2. The classification is just a formality. The rank is a little bit more important. The rank designates which node directly communicates with the vehicle. We don't want to overload the vehicle with too many instructions. We just want we want to make it easier for the vehicle to have a succinct amount of instructions and just know exactly what to do, but just by one. 1 or 2, let's be honest, because secondary 1 will also be able to communicate. But we have primary 1 and primary 2. Now we have we're going to go ahead and state here how have a general idea of how many vehicles will be on one node at a certain time, and this is going to be how many vehicles a certain node will be responsible at any given time. Right here we have the small scenario and given a little bit of information here, bumper to bumper traffic, knowing that an average vehicle is at minimum 170 inches long. That means that we're going to have, worst case scenario, we have the smallest amount of vehicles all bumper to bumper. How many vehicles will be able to take all of that, or how many vehicles will the node itself be responsible for? It'll come to about 21, which should be, and right here we have a small computation algorithm or equation that we kind of determine how many computations per second is going to be necessary. And probably need to grab my charging cord. But here we see that, honestly, 210 n computations is going to be completely within the bounds of any processor that we use for here. Now more processors will be able to take on more computations, or better processors rather. And if that is the case, then we can change it accordingly and make it a little bit more efficient. But once again, this is just bare bones, brass tacks. What is the bare amount that any processor is going to need to be able to do? All right. From here, we have something that is called our angle of influence. Now, the angle of influence is going to be what is going to be what determines the rank of our processors. Now, sorry, I'm plugging my computer in because it is going to be necessary. Don't want to lose all of the work that we've already had. Perfect. Okay, so from here, we have what's called our angle of influence. Now, we have the ranks, we have the classifications, primary 1, secondary 1, and such. However, the vehicle is moving at 65 to 70 miles an hour. They're going to be changing ranks relatively often. So, what is our angle of influence? The angle of influence basically tells the nodes, okay, I'm going to be rank 1 while the vehicle is in this angle designated alpha right here. So whenever it passes into the area of influence, the rank becomes 1, and then that node is responsible for sending distinct information in terms of, hey, you need to rotate your tires and such. And at that point, rank 1 nodes also communicates with the rank 2 nodes, saying you are now current, or its neighbor nodes, and saying you are currently rank 2, and to expect to be rank 1 within a certain amount of time. So we have all of that information. It is a lot, I know, but we've gotten to a point where we have all of the basic information. So now that we can kind of take a look at how this works. So the algorithm is given here, very brass tacks algorithm, basically saying if the distance of the vehicle from the node is not, or I'm sorry, from the lane itself is not within the acceptable area, we decrease its speed by 20%, rotate its tires by half of the angle that is necessary to get back to 90 degrees. And if the angle itself is less than 5%, 5 degrees, then we just rotate it by the angle necessary to get back to 90 degrees. And if it isn't, then we resume speed over the next 10 seconds. The idea here is that if we rotate the tires too quickly, then at higher speeds, it can get very unsafe. So we only rotate the tires by half of the angle necessary to return back to 90 degrees. Yeah, it's a simple algorithm, but I believe it does the trick. Now, a lot of it, once I have a working computer model, then I can test this algorithm and see how it works in a practical situation, and then we can change a few things from there. After that, I have a couple of just small examples of the algorithm at work. Now, the important thing to note here is this is very individualized, like just taking a snapshot of the basically the situation. Now, this algorithm is an algorithm that happens, 10 times a second over the period of, let's say, 5 seconds. So there's a large amount of computations that happen here, which is why the computer model is going to be very, very necessary, because in order for us to have a very good working idea of the capability of the algorithm, we need to have it working in practical situations. And from there we have just some of the related work. We discussed the Huff transform and the canny edge detector. There's also a couple of fault detection and the model predictive control. Google has implemented its LiDAR system, and there's several things that are already working. However, this is the first sort of independent process from the car itself. All of these things are in the car itself and try to implement driver assistance from the car. My methodology comes from outside, and the car communicating with things on the outside in order to have a general idea of where or not a general idea, but a very specific idea of where the lane is and the bounds of the lane. So we discussed already here, there are things to make it just a little bit better. This, once again, is just the brass tacks of the idea. It's the bare bones, and there's a large amount of work that we can do to make it better. A lot of these we've already discussed, but increasing the processor power, so there's only one node in the margin as opposed to two. That's going to decrease overhead. If we increase the distance from each nodes, that's less nodes that we have to place, increases or decreases overhead. If we have all of the computation done on board, it limits the amount of processor power that we need in the nodes. So there are already a large amount of things that we can do to make this system more efficient. However, we do need to have a working idea of what the nodes need to be able to do in order to do their job at the lowest level necessary. I also want to start including the next go around the capability of there to be some sort of hub that can communicate with the nodes and update it on weather conditions or road work or things like that in order to more effectively measure real world conditions, because there are times that the weather is bad and the car needs to know that, and at the current moment it has no other way of knowing that. That is acceptable within this network or in this design. And we need to go ahead and the next iteration of this project will take on all sorts of a variety of roads, changing elevation, curved roads, and all these things. However, right now we just want to have a good idea that this is a doable idea, and it is a distinct idea that can work concurrently or independently from all other methods. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of work that is necessary. However, the idea itself, I believe, is doable, and if done correctly, could have a very good impact on driving itself and be the next step for achieving autonomous navigation. Thank you.